Fish invented farming before humans or great apes even existed. And I don't mean metaphorically. Pull up the criteria for what constitutes agriculture, and this colourful little reef fish hits every single one. They even domesticated another species to help with the field work. So, what exactly is this fish doing? If farming evolved here, how did one ancestor figure it out and pass it down? Or did something far stranger happen? How can a creature with no hands plant or harvest a crop? And if a creature with no concept of future planning can discover agriculture, what does it say about how we discovered it? Off the coast of the Great Barrier Reef, where dappled light streams through in golden ribbons, painting the sea floor, something small is very busy. This is the damselfish. It's barely the length of your hand and surrounded by animals 10 times its size. In the crowded coral reef ecosystem, it's easy to overlook. But watch closely for a moment and you'll notice something unusual. It moves with a kind of deliberateness you don't often see down here. Not the frantic darting of a fish looking for food or the lazy drift of something at rest. This fish has somewhere to be. With a whip of his vibrant, flat body, he glides around the patch of reef where he spends most of his days. The patch itself looks unremarkable at first, a rough, dark mat of filamentous algae tucked between two coral heads. It's noticeably different to the other algae growing nearby, tidier, more lush. What's he doing? This is a feeding ground, though not in the way you'd expect. Rather than graze the place dry, our damselfish takes a small bite here, moves on, takes another bite there. He's almost restrained in his movements, seeking out specific leaves and ignoring the rest. Every now and then, he does something unusual. Swimming down to brush the greenery, he picks up a small clump of growth in his mouth and carries it to the patch's border before spitting it out. He comes back, repeating the process again and again, transporting pieces of algae from the patch to the perimeter. Most surprisingly of all, he isn't eating any of it. He's soon joined by a female, but instead of helping him clear things away from the patch, she's bringing something towards it. Gently nestled in her mouth is a loose fragment of algae she pried from a nearby rock. She approaches calmly, he doesn't seem to mind her presence. She deposits her find carefully, nudges it once with her snout, and retreats. She's undoing his hard work, but he doesn't seem bothered. It seems they've found a peaceful coexistence. That is, until a careless neighbor gets a little too close for comfort. Grazing along the reef, a surgeonfish has crossed an invisible line in the water. It's in damselfish territory now, and even if it doesn't realize it yet, it will very soon. Before the intruder can react, the male damselfish launches himself like a missile. It doesn't matter that the enemy is 5 times his size, he's all fight and no fear. Furious at the intrusion, he drives straight into the surgeonfish's flank again and again, chasing it away from his algae patch. And then, as if nothing had happened, he goes right back to obsessively tending his patch. So what exactly is he doing? From a distance, he just seems like a very territorial creature, protecting his food source. But is that really all it is? What's with the selective eating, the algae removal, and the transplant his fellow fish brought over? Is it possible this tiny tropical fish learned how to do something only a handful of species have ever unlocked? Could he be farming? Today, the idea of farming conjures up images of massive industrial machines and endless monocrop fields. It's one of our biggest and most important industries, responsible for feeding over 8 billion people. But before precision technologies and global distribution networks, there were horses and plows, grain stores and local markets. And earlier still, before domesticated livestock, a few brave humans decided to stay put and live off the fruit of the land, rather than following herds of animals around. Were we being territorial like the damselfish, or tapping into a realization of something bigger? What actually separates a territorial animal from a farmer? When you strip farming back to its bare bones, there are really only 4 behaviors that matter. Humans exhibit all 4 across our farming history, and so does our damselfish. The first thing you notice is he's always in the same place. Most grazing creatures travel far and wide in search of a meal, especially when resources are scarce. But male damselfish stay put through thick and thin, playing out their 10 to 12-year lifespan on the same patch. In the wider reef, there are thousands of damselfish just like him, all tending to their own gardens. Their territories collectively cover up to 70% of the reef substrate in some zones. It's an endless patchwork of sprawling, underwater fields furiously defended by their residents. But how did they adopt the practice of agriculture in the first place? As larvae, damselfish spend about a month drifting on the current before settling on the seafloor well away from their parents' plot. They undergo metamorphosis into juveniles as strangers to the reef with no connection to any existing territory. Then, the hunt is on. These young fish must scour the busy reef floor for an unclaimed patch, settle on it, and get to work immediately. Every single damselfish farm starts from scratch with no guidance or memory of having seen it done before. Each plot typically houses only 1 damselfish. From what we know so far, it tends to be the male. The female just visits to spawn and then leaves, though we aren't sure of her movements since her life cycle is less documented. But we do know she tends to choose her mate based on the size, location, and productivity of his algal plot. For an activity to be considered agriculture, it must take place on a fixed site. For damselfish, it does. And, like humans, they've got a bit of a conqueror's streak in them, clearing land and expanding their farm boundaries into new territory. But we'll get to that later. Even more curiously, they also have their versions of urban and suburban living. You see, usually damselfish in poorer habitats with fewer neighborhoods get to maintain larger territories, kind of like the suburbs. Damselfish in denser, higher quality areas keep smaller ones. But just as sitting on a lawn all day doesn't mean you're farming it, just having an algae patch doesn't make these fish farmers. What matters is what they do with it. Coral reefs are incredibly biodiverse, earning them the name rainforests of the sea. There's lots of different algae growing all around. Some taste better than others. A common favorite is Polysiphonia, a fast-growing, highly digestible, delicious red algae. If it's absent from their plot, damselfish will venture out, find a clipping in the wild, and carry it back to be transplanted into fresh ground on its territory. Similarly, when an unwanted species creeps into the edges, he'll rip it out of the ground and dispose of it outside his farm boundary. These unpopular plants like Chondria, Padina, and Calothrix are hardy, aggressive growers that would outcompete anything if left unattended, the equivalent of weeds in a garden. I suppose you could say these behaviors aren't unlike planting and weeding. Both actions fit the second behavior that defines agriculture, modifying how plants are organized in a natural habitat. Damselfish's love for their algae patches seems to go beyond pure territorial instinct. They appear to be making deliberate choices that suit their needs and preferences. But modifying what grows is one thing. The real question is whether any of it actually makes a difference. Does his hard work change anything about the plants themselves, or is he just rearranging the furniture? Within damselfish patches, Polysiphonia is everywhere, but outside those borders, you'll be hard-pressed to find it. It's easily outcompeted by other algae species and a popular meal choice for several other herbivorous fish, which means that out in the wild, it either gets stifled by the competition or grazed to the ground by hungry feeders. But it's precisely this delicate nature that drew damselfish to Polysiphonia in the first place. When given the choice, would you rather grow a delicious, fast-growing but vulnerable species, or a slow, not-so-delicious but hardier one? Humans were faced with this exact trade-off in our early agricultural history. We selected for the most palatable and most productive species, like corn, barley, and wheat, domesticating and dominating them to the point where they remain staples of our diet and industry till today. But there's a catch. Now, we're just as dependent on those crops as they are on us. Sure, modern wheat can't spread its own seeds without human hands, but without wheat, our entire food supply would collapse and millions would starve to death. The same is true for the damselfish and Polysiphonia. Without the fish, the algae dies out within a week, but without the algae, the fish loses its staple food source forever. This raises an interesting question: who domesticated whom? Just because humans and damselfish take on the active role, does that mean we are the dominant species in this dynamic? Let's think about things from the algae's point of view for a moment. Polysiphonia is bad at surviving in the wild. Suddenly, this fish comes along that can take care of it, give it a safe place to grow and thrive, protect it from predators, remove competing plants, and spread its seeds across the coral reef floor from one patch to another. A plant that couldn't last a few weeks alone now covers over 2/3 of the reef. So, who's the real winner here? In being exactly what the damselfish needs, Polysiphonia made itself indispensable. In return, the fish does everything else for it. This kind of independent relationship is called obligate mutualism, when two species rely on each other to the point that neither can survive without the other. In ensuring Polysiphonia's survival, damselfish tick the third behavior of agriculture, selectively enhancing some plant species and not others. So, the damselfish has a fixed site, modifies what grows on it, and has cultivated a crop so thoroughly that neither can exist without the other. But does any of this hard work actually show up in the harvest? And what does it actually look like for a fish to harvest something? To answer that, we need to talk about something researchers noticed that nobody expected: his bathroom habits. Curiously, the damselfish is a shy bathroom goer. Rather than relieving himself wherever he happens to be, he consistently goes at the margins of his territory, never the center. It sounds trivial, but it's the difference between a flourishing plot that attracts a mate and a lonely, hungry existence. Damselfish waste is rich in nitrogen, one of the primary nutrients that drives algal growth. By depositing it at the perimeter rather than the middle, he fertilizes the edges of the farm, encouraging it to expand outwards. Whether he understands the connection between his waste and his crop, we can't say, but the precision of it is difficult to dismiss. And as if planting, fertilizing, weeding weren't enough, the damselfish takes things one step further. They domesticated livestock to help with their tasks. Hovering above the patch is a small, almost invisible cloud of translucent mysid shrimp, millions of them. While damselfish drive every other creature away in a violent attack, they allow these guys to be undisturbed. For a long time, nobody understood why. It wasn't until researchers from Griffith and Deakin universities looked closer that we found the answer. Turns out the shrimp's waste is packed with exactly the kinds of nutrients Polysiphonia algae needs most. By tolerating their presence, the damselfish has acquired a fertilizer workforce. The shrimp gets safety from predators, and the damselfish get a fertile farm. It's a win-win. The dynamic is astonishingly similar to how humans are thought to have initially domesticated cattle. It was probably not a conscious decision, but rather a gradual, accidental mutualism that let both species benefit more together than apart. Cattle were drawn to primitive human settlements for scrap food and shelter, and since they were useful, strong, and produced good fertilizer, we tolerated their existence. Over generations, they were woven into the fabric of the farm, much like mysid shrimp on damselfish farms. And at the end of the day, all of the damselfish's efforts pay off. Just like human farms, these fish farms are more productive than unmanaged nearby patches, making the fourth and final criteria for agriculture. So damselfish work on a fixed site, modify what grows on it, enhance certain plant species, and increase the biomass of the area. Their behavior meets all four criteria of agriculture. But if they've never seen their parents farm and tend to live on their farm alone, they couldn't have learned this by observation. So where did they learn to farm? The damselfish family is made up of 5 main subfamilies, which split apart between 55 and 20 million years ago. In total, they number close to 400 different species, roaming tropical oceans all over the world, making them the 3rd largest group of fish in coral reef systems. Damselfish diversified into 3 main groups, defined by their diets. Those that hunt small planktonic crustaceans, those that graze on filamentous algae, and those that subsist on an intermediary diet of zooplankton, deep-sea invertebrates, and algae. If these fish learned to tend their patch from one founding farmer, you'd expect to see that behavior concentrated in one branch, radiating outwards down generations from a single point of origin. In other words, one grazing species would have developed farming and passed it on to all their offspring and subsequent subspecies over time. We'd expect those closely related creatures to all farm and eat the same way, in contrast to more distantly related damselfish, who would have different hunting habits. But in place of this neat pattern, they found something much more intriguing. Farming pops up in one lineage, then in an unrelated one, and another, scattered across the family tree in a seemingly random mess. In most cases, the direct relatives of farming species don't farm. The species on either side of a farming lineage are ordinary foragers. Every time farming appears on the family tree, it appears as if from nowhere. This phenomenon, when the same trait keeps popping up in different populations, is known as convergent evolution. It's the reason both vertebrates and mollusks have eyes, why bats, birds, and insects all have wings, and why horses and humans have toes. All these structures evolved independently to solve similar environmental pressures. But farming isn't a body part. It's a sophisticated, multi-step behavioral system encompassing selective weeding, fertilization, crop cultivation, and even domestication of other species to help maintain their fields. Recent studies estimate it might have evolved very early on in damselfish history and then up to 11 separate times much later on across the damselfish lineage. Every time farming evolved, it came from omnivorous ancestors, specializing into farmers that cultivate specific algal mats in an effort to optimize food access and security in a competitive coral reef ecosystem. Over the course of millions of years and under the right environmental pressures, damselfish made multiple independent transitions, edging them closer and closer to their modern farming practices. For whatever reason, a generalist happily grazing on whatever the reef provided stumbled into agriculture again and again and again. There's a reason it kept happening to generalists specifically. Damselfish dietary transitions tend to follow a one-way street. Older, omnivorous lineages evolve towards becoming either purely herbivores like our farmers or plankton eaters, but this process rarely goes the other way. Once a lineage specializes, it locks in. So this behavior kept being invented from scratch across millions of years and thousands of kilometers of ocean, even though these fish had no way of communicating with each other or sharing information. And just like for humans, once agriculture took hold, it changed everything about damselfish society. A fish that once roamed the reef in search of whatever it could find became a settler, stationary, specialized, and entirely committed to a single patch of ground. It built a more reliable food source, attracted better mates, and carved out a permanent stake in one of the most competitive ecosystems on Earth. But the parallels don't end here. Our farming revolution gave us civilization while accelerating the destruction of the natural world. The same is true for our damselfish. Watch him long enough and you'll catch it. A quick, seemingly harmless act with devastating consequences. Between routine patrols of weeding and fertilizing, our damselfish turns his attention to the coral surrounding his plot. Not to tend to it or to harvest something from it, quite the opposite. He approaches, sure of himself. Opening his narrow mouth, he reveals a row of incisor-like teeth that seem out of place for a herbivore until you see what comes next. With one smooth snap of his jaws, he bites off a piece of living coral, leaving behind a pale white scar on the skeleton beneath. And this death by 1,000 cuts spells devastation for the entire community that depends on coral to survive. You see, when you think of coral, most people picture something like this, a rigid branch structure, hard as rock. But in reality, that skeleton is just the scaffolding. Living coral is a thin layer of soft tissue that stretches over that hard base, housing millions of microscopic algae that give it its vibrant color and produce most of the system's energy through photosynthesis. That tissue is the real powerhouse of this ecosystem. Damselfish selectively prune back this living tissue on coral that encroaches too close to its algal plot. He works the boundary between his mat and the adjacent living coral colony, one small patch at a time. Bite after bite, the damselfish slowly kills off more and more living coral tissue, exposing the white calcium carbonate skeleton underneath. He's clearing land for a larger farm. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, but support about 25% of all marine species on Earth. The more living coral gets converted into algal farmland, the fewer juvenile fish can shelter in their shadows, the fewer invertebrates can survive to feed the wider reef, and the harder it is to come back from what's already been lost. It's a familiar story that hits painfully close to home. Our very own Amazon rainforest covers about 4.5% of Earth's land surface area, but supports 10% of all animal species, including 22% of all vascular plants in the world. And so far we've lost 17% of the forest, with the leading driver of deforestation being clearing the land for cattle ranching and soy plantations. It seems we have more in common with damselfish than first meets the eye. You see, coral and algal mats need each other. Coral builds the physical structure that shelters thousands of species, while algae forms the base of the food chain that feeds them. But they're also mortal enemies. They compete for the same surface space and light, existing in a delicate balance that's easily disturbed. As the damselfish chips away to expand its territory, it's unknowingly tipping the scales towards environmental collapse that would make their short-term win futile in the long run. The increased scarring on corals caused by damselfish are positively correlated with higher rates of coral disease outbreak. The exact mechanism isn't fully understood, but the pattern is consistent enough that researchers now consider damselfish farming one of the contributing factors in reef degradation, particularly on reefs already under stress from bleaching events and rising sea temperatures. Algal mats grow and spread very fast, taking over coral in just a few days. When this happens, the living coral tissue suffocates beneath it. The structure collapses, and a reef that housed thousands of species and took centuries to build can disappear within a generation. Once a reef tips from coral-dominated into algae-dominated, it rarely tips back. Usually, reefs are filled with herbivores like surgeonfish and parrotfish who work together to keep algae in check. But as we've seen, damselfish don't like these colorful competitors lingering too close to their turf. Inside his borders, that's the point. But the effect radiates outwards. A reef dense with damselfish territories is a reef where the natural checks on algal growth keep getting disrupted over and over across an enormous area. Other herbivores are driven away, and the algae that would otherwise be controlled starts to creep. Multiplied by thousands of damselfish plots across a reef already on the edge, it tips the balance dangerously. And yet, for all the damage his farming does, the reef may be worse off without this disruptive little damselfish. What happens if we remove them from the coral reef entirely? Does the ecosystem bound back to health? Or are these little creatures secretly stewarding the land in ways we don't immediately notice? Without the damselfish there to manage them, the careful structure of dense, filamentous algae that made the farm so fertile gives way to unstructured growth that's far less productive. The highly palatable Podiciphonia algae quickly gets overrun by other, hardier species that offer less nutrition to nearby herbivores. Peer in a little closer, beyond the tangle of ragged plants, and you find a community on its knees. What was once a metropolis teeming with fragile invertebrate life, from the youngest larvae to the smallest crustaceans, is now nowhere near its former glory. Without their aggressively defensive shepherd to protect them, their chance of survival in this abandoned field isn't any better than it would be anywhere else in the reef. Damselfish farms are micro-habitats for invertebrate biodiversity, including polychaete worms, juvenile invertebrates, and larvae at their earliest stages of development. They house measurably more of them than unmanaged patches of the same reef. Without damselfish, the reef loses a nursery that nurtures invertebrates to establish and reproduce. And that loss travels up the food chain. Damselfish farms are among the most productive patches on the entire reef. More algae grows inside a managed territory than in any equivalent unmanaged patch nearby. Removing damselfish robs the entire ecosystem food chain of a strong, resilient foundation, making the food chain above thinner, weaker, and less able to absorb the next shock that comes along. A thinner, weaker reef is bad news at the best of times, but in a warming ocean, it can be fatal. When the water gets too warm, tiny symbiotic algae that live in the coral start overheating. This causes oxidative stress on the coral, which is damaging in the long run. However, coral isn't fragile. It can tolerate a certain amount of oxidative stress. But if temperatures stay too high for too long, it goes into emergency response mode and does what it has to do. It expels the tiny algae as a last resort to save itself. This is a dangerous move. Without the algae, the coral turns white and will struggle to produce enough energy to survive, since most of its resources came from the little algae. If it stays in this bleached state for too long, the coral eventually starves and dies. As climate change warms the world, bleaching events are getting more and more frequent. Over the last decade alone, the Great Barrier Reef has experienced 6 mass bleaching events. As of April 2024, nearly 60% of reefs in the Great Barrier Reef were exposed to dangerous levels of heat stress and bleaching that increases the risk of mortality. That's thousands of square kilometers of living coral massacred in one fell swoop. In 2022, a group of researchers wanted to understand how corals growing near damselfish territories and corals in unmanaged areas reacted differently to these bleaching events. They took corals and placed some of them near active damselfish territories and others away from them on the same reef. Then, they subjected both groups to thermal stress, simulating a bleaching event. When the temperatures spiked, something remarkable happened. The corals sitting away from damselfish territories released their friendly algae and bleached as expected. But the corals near damselfish territories did not. After 2 weeks, the population of symbiotic algae remained intact in damselfish territory coral despite the temperature change. So clearly, damselfish are doing something that's building resilience into the ecosystem. What could have caused such a protective effect? Well, the exact mechanism is still being studied, but for now, the leading theory points towards extra nutrients. The presence of damselfish greatly increases the concentrations of oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus in the surrounding water, which might give the coral more energy reserves to manage the stress of higher temperatures, kind of like how fighting off a cold is generally easier when you're well nourished. In a warming ocean increasingly vulnerable to these bleaching events, that buffer matters a lot. But it seems a humble agricultural fish might just be protecting pockets of reef from the devastating consequences of climate change by providing resilience, nutrition, and biodiversity to this vulnerable ecosystem. Could they be aware of what they're doing? Do damselfish farm knowing it protects their natural habitat? And if so, did damselfish farming emerge from intelligence or something else? When we think about the dawn of human agriculture, we imagine a shorter, hairier version of ourselves with a mind capable of certain intentional decision-making. They'd look at the ground and deliberately choose where and how to make it produce something. With 12,000 years of hindsight, it looks like a snapshot moment of a great cognitive leap. We'd finally realized we could stop chasing our food and start planning it instead. But unfortunately, that's not how things progressed. The transition to agricultural societies was a gradual, messy, and accidental one, with one paper explicitly categorizing it as not a conscious decision. We think it might have been nothing more than a question of convenience. For example, the ears of domesticated wheat and barley do not shatter and drop their seeds when ripe, whereas those of their wild ancestors do, leaving the seeds to be dispersed by the wind. The non-shattering trait of modern wheat and barley is linked to a recessive gene. This means the probability of this characteristic taking over in the wild is unlikely without intervention. But if hunter-gatherers camping near wild grain patches noticed that some didn't drop their seeds, it would make sense for them to collect those. It's more convenient to harvest the concentrated seeds all clustered in the plant rather than the search for the dispersed ones in the grass. Without knowing it, humans had begun selecting for certain traits. The grains that didn't shatter and fall were the ones that ended up being replanted. It's a far cry from combine harvesters, precision-engineered crops, and large-scale industrial agriculture. Slowly, over generations, both the grains and humans changed in response to one another until reaching the relationship of obligate mutualism we share today. Once farming took hold, our bodies began to change. The ability to digest lactose into adulthood emerged independently in multiple human populations after they began herding cattle, a genetic adaptation that followed the behavior by thousands of years. We didn't evolve to farm and then start farming. We started farming accidentally, and our biology caught up later. So for us at least, agriculture wasn't the result of a genius epiphany. But what about for the damselfish? Well, at the core of it, the damselfish is just an obsessive cleaner. They keep clearing ground from their territory, getting rid of everything they don't want, continuously resetting the algal growth on their plot to an early stage where fast-growing species naturally took over. The mutualism with Polysiphonia formed around that behavior, and with enough repetition, something resembling a farm emerged. Agriculture, it seems, is less like an intelligent invention and more like an emergent property. And we see this in other parts of the animal kingdom too. Leafcutter ants, for example, are a highly territorial ant species that have been cultivating fungus gardens for about 50 million years. Working in vast underground colonies numbering into the millions, they march out onto the forest floor, cut sections of leaves with their serrated jaws, and carry them back to the nest, sometimes traveling hundreds of meters with loads many times their own body weight. Back at the colony, they chew the leaves into a pulp and use it as a growing medium for a specific species of fungus which they cultivate in dedicated underground chambers. They weed out competing fungi, fertilize the crop with their own waste, and harvest the fungus to feed the colony. They even treat their plots with antibiotic-producing bacteria to protect their fungi from parasites. The ant and the fungus are so codependent, the fungus doesn't exist outside of ant colonies, and the ants can't survive without it. Across three very different animal groups, the same playbook appears. Give a territorial animal a fixed food source, a competitive environment, and enough generations, and farming emerges on its own. Both humans and damselfish stumbled into farming the same way, accidentally, without understanding what we were building. Since we shared, innovated, and iterated on every generation's mistakes, our farming efficiency exploded, and with it our population, our intelligence, and our impact on the natural world. In many ways, farming gave us our intelligence, paving the way for complex cooperation, forward planning, and technological innovation. We had to work like a team like never before, develop our social intelligence, and invent record-keeping systems to track food surplus and crop cycles, which would eventually lead to writing. Damselfish are farmers, but with a different approach. They lean into solitude, oblivious they're using the same tactics their ancestors did 50 million years ago. But that doesn't make them any less agricultural than us. After all, they discovered it long before we did. Speaking of discoveries, we've discovered an absurd amount of cheap, soulless AI documentaries on YouTube these days. You must have noticed them too. Well, this documentary was created with no AI by 14 brilliant people who love telling stories about the natural world we all share. But for every $1 we spend on production, YouTube only pays us back 30 to 40 cents. We launched this documentary series to fight back against the endless barrage of AI slop riddled with inaccuracies and misinformation. But now we need your help, or this series is in danger of going extinct. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can join our mission on Patreon by investing in quality scientific storytelling from real people. We need 500 of you to join as paying members to make this possible, so every sign-up makes a huge difference. And if you can't, that's okay. Like this video, share it with a friend, or drop a comment about your experience with AI documentaries. It's time for YouTube to pay attention and fix the misinformation problem. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.